So, welcome everyone, and wonderful to have you here. And more people are coming. But I wanted to before. So, welcome. This is what I have to deal with regularly. Forgetting to turn the sound off. So, in a few minutes, we'll turn the recording on. And to record it, but also I just wanted to make a few announcements before we start, and both for all of you here and also for the people who are on YouTube. It feels like the Sunday morning community has now expanded dramatically because of the pandemic and the YouTube. And but how to integrate these two is not so obvious to me. With the pandemic, it became clear that it would be useful with online, to do a lot of these guided meditations, to have a connection and to everyone and support. But before the pandemic, we used to come Sunday morning and sit in silence. There was no guided meditation. So now that people are coming back in person again, what do we do? And we still have this online. We still have the online community who's participating and who's maybe even expecting the little guided meditation. And so how do we do this? So I don't have an answer, but it'll be what it is as it unfolds. And also we still have a mask mandate here in San Mateo County when people gather, and maybe even after the mandate's gone for a while, we want to be careful with this. So the people on YouTube, will be seeing me with the mask on. But to our surprise, I think the quality of the sound is okay going through the mask. Is that right for the people here? We tested it last week, and the consensus of the few people who are here, right, Kevin, was that I actually sounded better. So I think as introductory words, and then I used to have, I still have the laptop here, but I used to have a big 27-inch monitor here, so I could kind of be a little bit track the chats and all that. But I don't want to have the monitor anymore now. But I have my laptop in front of me, so. And people online are saying, yes, it sounds good. It's fine with them. That's good to hear. Maybe the mask will never go off. And so yes, Martha.
And shall I ring the bell, or will you be ringing your bell?
Oh, let me do it today, and then we'll see what happens next time. So why don't you can start recording, and then we turn it off before the audio recording at the end of the sitting. So then I can offer everyone a little bit more formal or welcome. So those of you here, thank you for coming. I don't know if it took a little bit of bravery to come, but if it not so much. And it's wonderful to have you, and having, it's a limited numbers coming, and I see you all as representing the wider community who you are. So maybe you just think you're coming as yourself, but in my eyes, you come as a representative of a community that's actually grown. And in a sense, this large number of people have been watching online is part of our community now. It's expanded. And so I appreciate those of you who are online that you're here, and hopefully the transition to doing live is harmonious enough for you and for the online people, and maybe you'll consider that the people who are here, there's about 25 people here, that they are kind of representing you as well, just a sense of that there are embodied people out there in this world after all. And here you are. So thank you for coming. So we'll meditate, and so if you would give some loving care to your meditation posture. And the loving care is not only to be comfortable, but there's something about love or care that you want to sit in such a way that there's a potential for a greater aliveness, a greater attentiveness that's embodied. And so for some people that means sitting up a teeny bit straighter than you normally would. And maybe sitting up a little bit more, and so that the chest can be a little bit more open. And so if you take a few deep breaths, there's more room in the chest for the lungs to expand. And so to take a few long, slow, deep breaths. And as you exhale, to settle in, to relax. And part of the function of attention to posture, attention to deeper breathing, is to connect to the embodied aspect of mindfulness. Sometimes I wish we had translated the word sati not as mindfulness, prioritizing the mind, but to bodyfulness. And so to whatever degree that's available to you, to spend a few moments here becoming embodied, connected to your body. And then gently letting your breathing return to normal. And on the exhales, continue this process of embodiment by relaxing into your body and letting your body relax into itself. Perhaps you can soften and relax the face. The forehead, around the eyes and jaw. Exhaling and relaxing the shoulders, letting the shoulders settle back into the body rather than maybe being lifted. And when you relax and soften your belly, maybe feeling the weight of your body settling into the pull of gravity, settling your body, your belly, more deeply into the bottom of your torso. And one way that people become disembodied is through a lot of thinking. But a lot of thinking often has an embodied quality. There can be physical tension or pressure, agitation. associated with that thinking. It might be around the forehead, in the brain, sometimes in the jaws or the shoulders, even the hands sometimes can be slightly tense. And if you're able to recognize the physical effect of thinking a lot, perhaps on the exhale, you can relax that tension, pressure. In a sense, relaxing. And one more time, kind of coming back into your body more fully. And then keeping a tether of attention, a connection to the physicality of the body breathing, a gentle connection to how the body experiences breathing. And as long as you can stay connected to the physicality of breathing, the movements of the breath, maybe you don't have to worry so much about what thinking you have, especially if the thinking is in the background and not interfering. And if thinking does interfere, maybe relaxing the thinking muscle. And then as we come to the end of this sitting, to mention that I find sometimes that meditation feels like being turned inside out. Sometimes to a minor degree, sometimes to a great degree. That as we become more settled here in our bodies, in our experience, with maybe a kind of inner stability or calm, sometimes there can be a greater sensitivity. So then when we turn our attention outwards towards the world, we feel and sense or perceive that world with that deeper sensitivity. And hopefully with a deeper stability, openness. And as we get turned inside out and we turn our sensitivity, our calm, our stability, to bring to mind the people in our lives, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, across the lands, and if there's no obligation to be caring for them or be compassionate, is there some kind of care, goodwill, however small, that flows from that inner sensitivity when we perceive people from a place of stability and calm? And if there is some goodwill, some care that seems to flow from the embodiment or the calmness or the settledness, perhaps these following words can help you feel more connected to it. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free. And may acting on this care for others contribute to your own freedom and happiness. May you care for the world and for others in a way that cultivates well-being, welfare, and freedom for yourself. May all of us contribute to each other's happiness and freedom. So, hello everyone and welcome. So this is the first hybrid Dharma Talk here at IMC. So with some of you here, about 25 of you here today, thank you for coming. And for the people online, thank you for being here. Appreciate it very much. And we're still in our county has a mask mandate, and also out of caution, so we're even giving the talk will be with a mask. And I find it kind of cozy to meditate with the mask on, actually. I keep my mouth slightly open, and the humidity of my feels kind of cozy for me. And so anyway, each person has unique response to this mask thing and meditating with it. And so we're beginning to shift here, and hopefully this shift in this direction will continue, and we'll slowly open up more and more, and here at IMC, and start offering some of the programs we offered before, and new programs. And but for those of you online, it means that some of the format will shift probably a little bit, and we'll see how much guided meditation I do. It used to be before the pandemic that we didn't do it Sunday morning, and now so we'll see how we continue or don't continue with it. And then the other thing is that I felt like during it was all on Zoom or on YouTube, it felt too long to speak for the full time we used to do Sunday morning. I felt like it felt more appropriate to talk less, and so it was a half an hour on Sunday. And but the old format was closer to 45 minutes or 40 minutes or something. It was more variable. We were scheduled to go until 10:45. So for those of you who are on YouTube, that'll shift. We'll go back to the 10:45 ending. And whether the talk will be that long or not, or whether we talk for a shorter time and have a period for Q&A, and it's variable depending on the situation. So for today, the talk I want to give, I want to do, I'll tell you what I'm going to try to do. I want to first recite a 4-line verse that captures what the Buddha had to teach in a kind of nutshell. And it kind of sets the stage for the talk. And then I want to kind of just name this whole period from March 7th or something like that until now that we've been closed, and what a big impact it's been for individuals, for our society, and here we're coming together after we've all been through this thing that people will be talking about for decades. What were you doing back then? It was like when I was younger, people said, where were you when John F. K. died, when he was killed, John F. Kennedy? And people would, talk about, oh, I was there, that was how, or 9/11, where were you, what happened? Then people would be talking about, what were you doing during that pandemic? And it'll be kind of like a reference point. And then I want to talk a little bit about one of the little subsections of our society, or big subsection of society that had its own impact around the pandemic, but which is the medical field, but in particular how I'm inspired by medical ethics, and what we can maybe tap into and learn from that as Buddhist practitioners, and also as we open IMC, about how we can be as a community perhaps, that would give us a kind of a different orientation for how maybe we can be as new opportunities opening up, to kind of open up in a fresh way, a new way, with new perspective. And so I wanted to borrow from that medical ethics and see if we can maybe get a different angle on what we're doing here. And then if there's time, try to then apply that also to our practice and into IMC. So that's kind of the plan. So so the verse uh, is kind of significant because the last verse, the last line, says, "This is the teaching of the Buddhas." So it's in plural. So in Buddhas, there's some idea that this Buddha has been Buddhas for, periodically down through the eons. The Buddhas appear in the cosmos, in Buddhist cosmology. But they all have this teaching. And it's kind of, so the teaching is, don't do any harm. Very simply, it's not quite literally exactly right, but it's close enough for now. Don't do any harm. Do things which are wholesome. Purify the mind. This is the teachings of the Buddha. That's it. You should memorize that. Don't do any harm. Do what's wholesome. Purify the mind. And this is the teachings of the Buddha. If you want, you can forget about memorizing the last line. And so that's kind of the background for this today. And I think that we shouldn't underestimate how big this whole pandemic time has been and continues to be for probably all of us. Some of us have been in more fortunate circumstances during this time, and some people have not. And but even the people in fortunate circumstances, I think it's probably had much bigger impact on the psyche, on the heart, than most of us can realize. And if you have been impacted by it in all kinds of ways, you should probably also assume it's probably bigger impact than you actually realize at this point. That, it's remarkable to me that just in the United States, 1 in 500, no, is that right? I think it's 1 in 500 Americans have died from COVID. It's quite something. It's quite a large amount of people. 700,000 people. And in the world, it's almost 5 million people have died. And that's just the people who've died. And there, there's a ripple effect. Those people who lost someone. If you didn't lose someone you loved and cared for, probably you know someone who has. And it's not so far steps away. And then there's other effects of the pandemic that ripple out that have been difficult, just in terms of health. I mean, certainly just COVID has been hard for people who didn't die. And then but there's all kinds of other things, like I had several family members in hospitals for different, not for COVID during this time. And it was hard to have them in hospitals or because you couldn't visit sometimes. And then there was kind of certain kind of fear around, like, what does it mean to be in a hospital around this time, especially before the vaccine came out. And then not going to the doctors or not having access to the doctors. And I had to have a tooth extracted. And it turned out it was hard to find someone who would do it because everyone had put off. I put off things, right? All these people put off things. And so then finally when I got around to it, everyone was getting back in the summer and doing things. So this has been the biggest recession in the United States since 1930s. So the people economically have been impacted huge. People have lost their jobs, and some people their homes, and all kinds of things. So just the pandemic's been huge. And then in addition to that, maybe, and kind of compounded by it, the tension of it all, is some of the social challenges of these last years. The tremendous focus on racism and the pain of that and the disparities that exist in this country that have become more and more evident. The tension between different political factions has just gone up much more dramatically, and so much has been politicized in a way that maybe was never before. And so, regardless of what side of a political divide we sit on, we feel the tension and the challenge of it. And then there's here in California and other places, all these fires, like fire after fire after fire. And it's quite impressive. And other places there's floods and hurricanes and all these challenges, and then just the challenge of getting supply chains being disrupted, and and like, what does that mean? We can't get the things we usually want. And there was a time in the pandemic that was some people are kind of frightened about getting just basic goods. And so these are all challenging times. And one of the places those challenges were huge was in the medical field. Before the vaccine, hospitals, and even after the vaccine, it's been quite challenging. And there was a time, 100 years ago, a year ago, that feels like a long time, when there was a real emphasis on the medical workers being heroes, superheroes. And I think they deserve that name because it was quite a dedication to show up at the hospital and to work before the vaccine, for example, and just do what it took to try to meet the people who came who were dying and very sick and offer the best care they could. And now, in some places in the country, they're still doing that, and there's surges. But now they're dealing with hostility from people who don't believe in vaccinations or don't believe in the medical establishment, feel excluded or feel criticized or feel somehow they're going to be abandoned by it, and so they're angry. One friend of mine who works in a hospital in some state said that to go to work, she has to go through protests outside the hospital. And she said, these are people who hate us. We're just going to try to save lives, and we're hated for what we're doing. So there's, and some of them I've read that some of them will take off their uniform and their badge when they go shopping in a grocery store in some communities, because if they're seen as a medical worker, the people will express hostility to them. So that makes it the job of offering medical care much more difficult when they were heroes a year ago, and now in some communities they're the opposite. So with medical, I've had some conversations with people, and I'm on an ethics committee for a local hospital, so I hear a little bit of this as well. And one of the things that inspires me is how often the medical people I've talked to evoke medical ethics. And one way they talked about it is they're committed to care for anyone who comes in through the door to the emergency. And anybody who comes, they're going to offer the best care they can. And they're committed to that, to offer equal care. And one of the people said explicitly, it means that if someone has been a rapist or had murdered someone, our job is to offer the best care we can. We don't turn anyone away. We know everyone's treated equally. Whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, we are committed to caring for them best we can. It's not our job to distinguish who should get or who should not be getting care. And this kind of complete willingness commitment to just be available for everyone equally and to care in these challenging circumstances, I think is quite inspiring to me. So in the field of medical ethics, there are 4 principles for medical care. And they have kind of Latinish kind of big words in that field. I'll tell you kind of the big words. And they are, because medical folks will use these big words because it's part of their understanding. So the first is autonomy. The second is beneficence. The third is non-maleficence. And the fourth is justice. And autonomy means, in that kind of setting, as I understand it, refers to the idea that every patient has the right to make their own decisions, unless they have something like dementia or something. They can't. But and then there's if someone can't make a decision for themselves, it usually often evokes the ethics committee of the hospital to really consider, is that really the case, and make sure that it's not the whim of someone who, that really caring for that sense of autonomy that people have. So that's kind of a fundamental value, at least in this country, around medical ethics. And then beneficence means that the dedication is to do what's beneficial for the patient, for the person there. Whatever is beneficial to support them and help them. And does it help the person? Does it benefit the person? Non-maleficence means do no harm. And occasionally there's a conflict between those two. And so, then sometimes the medical ethics committee is brought in to discuss that, or we have to, what to do if there seems to be a conflict. And then justice in this context seems to mean that a fair use, everything's offered fairly to everyone. It's a fair access. So the medicines, procedures, everything in the hospital especially, is offered equally to everyone with no distinction between any kind of, economic status, any kind of distinction, race, whatever. Everyone is treated equally. And so that's sometimes a challenge because sometimes there's limited resources in hospital. And so how does it limited resources distributed in a fair way to everyone? And so again, sometimes the ethics people in hospital have to come in and really kind of consider this carefully and figure out how do we do this. And this became particularly important during the COVID times when hospitals reached their, beyond their peak limit. And how do you do, they had triage kind of situation set up because they had to figure out how to do this as fairly as they could, but they couldn't do everyone because it was impossible. And so how do you make this decision? So it's a little similar to that Buddhist verse, do no harm, the non-maleficence. The Buddhist thing is do what's wholesome, which can be considered what's beneficial, do what's skillful, what's useful, helpful. And but the two things which are not, in that verse in the same way is this idea of autonomy and justice. And I find that, this idea of, one of the challenges around autonomy, especially if we take it outside of the hospital setting, to grant everyone their autonomy, it lends itself, or can be very supportive of a certain kind of selfishness. And whatever I want, I'm supposed to be autonomous, and I can get what I want what I want. And there's a lot of selfishness, a lot of self-centeredness. But some of that autonomy and some of that insistence on being able to make choices for oneself is also very healthy and appropriate. And how do we distinguish between that and find our way with it? And I don't have a good answer in the abstract, but I think that that's one of the advantages of embodied mindfulness, a really careful, settled attention, is that we can start feeling very, very carefully what is beneficial and what is harmful, what promotes stress and tension and undermines our well-being, and what promotes it. And it turns out that selfishness undermines our well-being. If you're really attentive, you can feel that. A healthy sense of autonomy, a healthy sense of self, you can feel and sense the difference in when it feels right. And the greater the mindfulness, the more settled and focused we are in meditation, I think that it's remarkable how the better and greater reference point we have for finding the difference between these two modes of being. And so eventually in meditation, the sense of autonomy becomes more and more interesting, because in the end, it's not that we become autonomous, but that, look how I'm an autonomous person, I'm going to be my own person in a sense. But rather, it's the awareness that becomes autonomous. It's awareness set free. And sometimes they talk about in Buddhism, the mind set free, the mind liberated through non-clinging. But I like to think what exactly the mind is a little complicated, but I have this clear idea that if we understand it to be awareness, that awareness is becoming autonomous. And what's it becoming autonomous from? it's becoming autonomous from ourselves. Any kind of baggage of self, any kind of association, beliefs we have about it. So I'll give you an example from myself, is that at some point in my practice, I recognized that I could be aware of things, I could be mindful and be present, but I recognized that mindfulness came along with an attitude, like with baggage of kind of penetrated or kind of suffused the awareness itself, and that was something like whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm aware of, it's the wrong thing. Well, if it's happening to me, it's not the right thing. If I'm being aware, I'm not aware the right way. And it was kind of subtle, but it was kind of like a policy that mind had made up. And so as I got quieter and quieter, at some point, I could see that I was operating through this filter of that all the time. And it kept my awareness, my mindfulness, a little tense, a little pulled back from the experience. And so as I started feeling being this pulled backness, this tension in how the awareness is, and the kind of contraction around it, that had to do with this kind of view, then I was able to relax that. And for a short time, I actually played around with kind of just assuming the opposite. If it's happening to me, it's okay. If I'm aware, I'm doing it just right. And that was actually useful for a little while to have that kind of try the opposite, because it helped me stay free, helped me find a different way. And then at some point I stopped doing that, and it was easier for me to have this kind of awareness than be autonomous, independent from this policy, these ideas, this baggage I had about what I needed to do, what was happening to me, my judgments about things. And so the awareness started to become simpler and simpler. And this idea of awareness becoming simpler without any baggage, associations, judgments, even a sense of self that came along, I'm the doer of mindfulness, was part of the wonderfulness of this kind of awareness set free. So to have the awareness be autonomous is kind of comes along with this liberation process in Buddhism. But the fourth medical principle of justice is and fairness. How does that play out in Buddhism? And I think that's one of the ones I think our society has maybe the greatest need for, is as a society, a community, is a community, a society that's fair, that somehow everyone seems to have a fair access to the opportunities that many times only the people who are very fortunate circumstance has available to it. And how does IMC offer itself fairly to the world? How do we give access to a wide circle of people so that it feels like we're just open and available, and how do we, if we turn IMC inside out, if we turn ourselves inside out, as I said in the meditation, as we settle and so awareness is set free, it's also setting the heart free. It's also this great deeper sensitivity as we go out into the world. And it doesn't make sense to meditate, be settled and peaceful and calm, and be kind of open and sensitive to what's happening, and then leave the meditation and immediately shut down, immediately kind of get caught up in our desires and our busyness of stuff, and kind of then have a barrier to really block to really feel and sense and be and care for this world around us. And it doesn't make sense because it's a way of not caring for ourselves. When we shut down, when we close up, when we get so preoccupied and caught up in our thoughts, our feelings, our concerns, our busyness, we lose something about ourselves. And this is something also that can be felt if you're mindful. But sometimes we're so distracted, we don't know that we're distracted. But if the mindfulness becomes second habit, second nature, and you're really sensitive and aware, you feel that as we get caught up in distractions, it actually is a kind of harm, a kind of self-limiting. It's kind of a undermining of ourselves, of something that we discover in meditation perhaps, or in other ways, that feels so healthy and so appropriate and so wise to be settled and peaceful and present. And so even though the social world is a complex and difficult world, part of the task of mindfulness practice is to learn how to bring this kind of presence and attention, open-heartedness perhaps, into the world with others as well. And so to turn ourselves inside out, so the part of that's sensitive to us, if we walk around with a closed fist, the most sensitive part of the hand is protected. That's very nice. No one's going to harm my sensitive hand ever again because I'm going to walk around this way. But that doesn't make sense, right? And but you want that sensitive part of your hand to be available. You know, if you have a cat, you want to, or if you want to touch the shoulder of someone who feels kind of has difficulty in their lives, and just I'm here with you, and or hold a hand of someone you care for, like maybe there's a little kid in your life, and so the kid wants to hold your hand. No, sorry, I'm keeping my sensitive part of my hand, safe. No, but so you're available for all kinds of things. So the same thing with the heart, with the inner life. If we keep it closed up, then we limit ourselves. But if we turn ourselves inside out, like the hand turns itself, opens up, but then we learn how to be stable. We learn how to not contract. We learn how to take care of ourselves from that place. We learn how to recognize all the subtle policies and attitudes that we have brought with us to being aware, to being attentive. And we realize maybe there's a lot of reactivity, beliefs, judgments that are sometimes quite subtle, that in ordinary life most people don't see because they're so busy with, too busy with doing things. But the advantage of getting quiet and still in meditation is we can start seeing these subtle ways, things, attitudes we bring along that often don't make us safe. This lack of safety that many people feel, some of it's real. The world's an unsafe place. But for many people also, the greatest danger for our safety is not the other people but ourselves. And so to understand how we bring our safety with us, not insisting that the world become a safe place for us, which is a little bit of a difficult, complicated issue, but sometimes we become less safe if we insist that other people make us safe. But how do we carry our safety with us? How do we discover that? It's a challenging thing, not easy, but it's, is it a powerful thing to discover that. And then it's easier to be open-hearted. It's easier to have this, keep our sensitivity open and allow ourselves to register the presence of other people, the existence of other people, and let it register in that place within where we care, where there's goodwill, where there's generosity, and but not in a way that we're obligated to care, not in a way that we're obligated to be generous or have goodwill, because I think that doesn't work so well. What's phenomenal, and kind of a miracle, is the degree to which sometimes we can feel that it's part of our nature to have goodwill. It's part of a natural kind of flow or natural responsivity to feel warmth, to feel care, to feel goodwill. And to stay close to that place where that it just seems to flow, it arises, and in a non-obligatory way. And one reason to stay close to it is that that's where the freedom is. That's where this autonomy is found, the autonomy of awareness set free, the mind set free. And you kind of can't have it both ways. you can't discover this radical liberation, this radical autonomy that mindfulness brings about, and stay closed, and shut out, and be distracted from being sensitive to this world. And so, how to discover to do both? That's the art of Buddhist practice. And then, if we're sensitive, if we have this open-heartedness, then I think it's easier to figure out justice, to want justice for each other, to want to be fair in how we use our resources and our activities, and not just live for ourselves, but to live for ourselves and for others. And this is one of the central principles, I believe, that the Buddha taught. That to live our lives for the welfare of ourself, the welfare of others, the welfare of self and others, and the welfare for the whole world. The Buddha defined a wise person as someone who has those four concerns. Concern for the welfare of themselves, for others, for self and others, and for the whole world. And it can seem like a big, heavy thing to be told that. Like, I got to get busy now. That's a lot to do. But again, it's coming from that place of freedom. It's coming from the place of autonomy, of subtleness that we hopefully discover through this practice. So it's not a duty. It's not work. It just seems to be an expression, natural expression of what's already in there when it's been set free, when it's here. And certainly it was a big surprise to me when, after some years of my practice in my early years, when there was more integrity in this psychophysical system that I am, when I wasn't self-preoccupied. There was more integrity when I was just available, or the system was available, to be responsive to the world around me. And that response, it seemed to just arise, to surface, kind of effortlessly. And then to act on that, to live from that. So what does it mean for us as a community, and IMC as a community, and now as a much larger community than we were before the pandemic, with all the people online? What does it mean, not as individuals, but we also come together in community? It's kind of special to be here. Those of us are here in person, and it's been special, the sense of community that's formed on YouTube over this time. And so what does it mean? That's when the Buddha said the wise person thinks about the welfare of self, welfare of others, and the welfare of self and others. The self and others I see to be, I think of as the we, the community that we are. And how do we care for this community? And how do we live as a community and care for each other? And how as a community do we turn ourselves inside out? And so our community sensitivity is also out into the wider world, and caring for this wider world that we live in and wider community. So how does it look for us to have these four principles available for our, at the foundation of our community, of autonomy and all the different things it might mean, non-harming, be dedicated to do what's beneficial to welfare for all involved, and justice, fairness. And what does that mean? And what does it mean in a social way, and for the wider communities that we're part of? And what does it mean, like we're here in Redwood City, what does it mean to be part of this Redwood City community, San Mateo community, California community? What kind of issues comes up when we think about fairness or justice as an expression of who we are, as a concern or that we have and carry with us? I don't have good answers for that, but I would like to believe that asking that question is part of this natural expression of this autonomy, this place of settledness, of being turned inside out by this practice. So here we are. In person here, we're still very much evidence of living in a pandemic times. All of us are wearing masks. And but we've come together in a community in a way that for some of you, perhaps, this is the most number of people you've been together with in this kind of way, maybe for a year and a half. I think I've been in one group that was maybe a little bit bigger than this in August, but that was only a couple of months ago, right? And there were months I hardly had any contact, direct contact with people outside my family. And so it's a big deal. And here we are coming. And I want to mark this time. We're coming together in community, and IMC as a connected community grows because of this. And you're contributing to not just being here, and you're contributing to that not just for those of you who are here, but I think it's also a sense that people who are not here kind of are now feeling that something is becoming embodied or something is growing again that has not been happening for many months. And so in what way can we be mindful of community and what's happening in community is one of the I think interesting and important questions at this time. So that's what I have to say. And would any of you would like to say anything? That we have about 6 minutes or so. And anything that you'd like to ask or bring up or say. And there's 2 ways of you can do it. You could, or 3 ways. You can try to speak loud, but then it won't be heard by the people on YouTube. There's a mic here we can pass to you. Or if you wanted to have the minimum physical contact, the mic that's on the stand back there, you stand holds it. The mic's held by the stand. All you have to do is push the button on, and once it's on, it can stay on. So I don't know if anyone would like to say anything or ask something. There's some very nice expressions of gratitude and warmth coming from the YouTube community. Yes, Bill. Do you mind using that?
I want to say how helpful it is for me to be back here. Past year and a half, my discipline when it comes to meditating at home has cratered. And my life is good, but my mind, state of mind isn't as equanimous as it could have been. I seem to need to have this structured setting.
Great. Yeah, being community makes a big difference.
And just to be honest. So lovely to be back here. Thank you.
Oh, great. Great to see you and have you back.
Thank you.
So here, Richard there. Hi, Richard.
So my experience has actually been somewhat different. I had kind of wandered away from the community because you had moved one direction, I had moved away, and it's a little farther to get here. And when I found out that the daily sessions were online, I started my practice again. And it actually has helped me tremendously, and I've really enjoyed being part of the larger Sangha. Nonetheless, it is still wonderful to be back in person, and this is very important, and I think I'm going to renew my intention to connect more often in person.
Wonderful.
But thank you very much for creating the larger Sangha as well, and I certainly hope that will continue.
Great, thank you. And then someone over here I saw, and then Molly.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Gil, that that it's been a pretty easy time for me, I think. It sounds strange, but Cheryl and I live in a senior retirement community of about 200 people, and of course we had, isolation and all that kind of stuff, and now we're able to get together in the dining room. But what I really noticed was how helpful my 50 years of meditation has been, and 25 with you in this community. It's made a very big difference and helped me to stay pretty equanimous. And that being said, there are times when I've lost it from time to time, glancing at my wife or the YouTube. Yes, that's occurred, but I feel like this has been a learning and growing experience for me.
Great, thank you.
And I appreciate your help in that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we would expect some testimonials that 50 years of practice,
Even 2 years would do it, though. I remember the first 5 years, I'm thinking, wow, my life things are falling in place.
Uh-huh.
And I think that my mindfulness, and one of my early teachers said that it turns up the volume on your intuition.
Nice.
And I think that was true for me.
Great. So maybe
Oh, okay.
yeah, Molly here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
When you announced that you were going to be opening the center, I
A
felt...
little bit closer.
Oh, when you announced that you were going to be having sessions, we could sign up once a month or whatever, I felt extremely privileged because I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands of people on the internet that would just give anything to be able to come here and experience this and to live here. And I've always felt very welcomed. And one of the things that you said today struck me. When there have been really difficult circumstances in my life, at one point before coming here, I felt like I was coming out of my skin, and it was a terrible, terrible feeling. And then after coming here, the message that you gave today was that I think it was something to the effect that you're turned, your insides are turned inside out and you feel comfortable. And it's just a wonderful way to be in the world. And I want to thank you for all of your support.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I also feel so lucky to be here and privileged. I'm also really appreciate your asking the question you did at the end of the talk. And it seems to me, maybe you use this phrase yourself, but it's asking how this community can turn inside out. And we were at a memorial service yesterday at a Christian church, a very activist Christian church. And the talk that was given was very moving, and the kind of talk that throughout my life would have had me go right out into the streets and march, protest. And I had really mixed feelings because I thought how it was very lovingly given, but how that's dicey stuff when you have that kind of great passion, and it's harder in a Buddhist perspective to have the equanimity and yet to act. So I really appreciate your ending with that very hard question. I don't have any answers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, right behind you, there.
I just want to say, thank you for you and to the bigger community, which helped me get through not just last year, but many years. Unfortunately, I lost my father early this year to COVID. And being in a different continent, I couldn't even go. But I think what kept me was your meditation and a lot of the teachings. I would go and listen to some of the the talks you had in those like grief or those kind of contexts. So I think all I want to say is it's been thankful to be, even though remote, but I never felt I was remote because I would listen to them all the time, and the meditation every day I think kept me going. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much. I love hearing that. So maybe that's it. Nana, you want to say something? Then we'll, yeah.
Yeah. I also want to give voice to the people who have, during this pandemic, not have had the easiest experience. And I will never, it's only the privileged who have had this experience. I remember a gentleman from India being interviewed during the pandemic, and he was asked, was he worried about COVID? And this is unforgettable. He said, are you kidding me? I'm worried about my next meal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So only the privileged, I think, can share this kind of sentiment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how to hold that? Yeah.
Great. Yes. Thank you. It punctuates very nicely. How do we live in this world in community with each other? What does it mean to feel community with everyone? And how do we know the whole range of joys and gifts and challenges and sufferings that this community, the wide community we live in, has? And how do we share with that? How do we connect to it? How do we know it? And how do we contribute to the welfare of everyone? A wise person is concerned with the welfare of themselves, welfare of others, the welfare of self and others, and the welfare of the whole world. May we all become wise. So thank you very much.